Hello and welcome to Connecting Tucson with Jamie Overturf, where we focus on connecting our community and local businesses here in Tucson. Today we are broadcasting from Tucson Business Radio X, which is situated in the Stewart Title corporate offices off of Broadway. And we have a very special guest with us today, Dr. Jason Moyle. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy you could come.
Appreciate that.
Jason comes to us today as a doctor of chiropractic medicine, and he is owning his own business and practice right here in Tucson, up in the Northwest area, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, you are a transplant from Iowa.
Correct.
But we're so not going to hold that against you. You've gone from Iowa farmlands, but you also were in the Air Force.
Yes, that is correct. I was active duty for 4 years.
Okay.
And stationed here at Davis-Monthan in Tucson.
Nice. Okay. So you were married to your wonderful wife of 18 years, Sylvia.
Correct. Yep.
And you have two beautiful children, Liv, who is age 8, and Isaac, who is age 11, correct?
Yes.
All right. So let's just jump right in. So you went from farmlands to Air Force to chiropractor. That seems like a really smooth transition. How did that happen?
I would like to say it was all part of the plan, but it just kind of, as most people's life, I would say it kind of happens. You dive into something, get some experience, realize you don't like certain things, realize you do like other things, and that's kind of how it goes. I started off, I wanted to play college basketball. I did play for a year back at a small school in Iowa. Didn't really know what I wanted to do school-wise, just was kind of the typical jock back then. You know, I did enough to stay eligible to play sports, but didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And a lot of my family went to the military. That's kind of the route that I decided to do.
That's where the Air Force came in?
Yep, that's where the Air Force came in. I think I grew up a lot in the Air Force, kind of figured out what I liked, what I didn't like. Hurt my back in the Air Force, went to a chiropractor. He helped me.
Oh, and then that light kind of came on that you get like that.
And I never really wanted to be a medical doctor per se, because I didn't want to deal with the messiness of it. You know, I wasn't involved. I didn't want to do a surgery, nothing like that.
No blood, no gore.
Correct, yeah.
The liquids that are involved.
Was not a big fan of that. And I've always been more like holistic, generally speaking.
Okay.
So chiropractic just seemed like a good fit. I never went to one before that or anything, but one thing led to the next.
So the transition that I'm really hearing is that while you were in the Air Force, you were injured, correct?
Correct.
So you had to go see a chiropractor.
Correct, yep.
And that's kind of where it led you into, so you seen a chiropractor. How did from seeing a chiropractor to becoming a chiropractor actually take place?
Well, I was curious in the body. I realized that I was smarter than I believed I was. I didn't put a whole lot of effort into school in high school. But when I was in the military, they teach you a lot about discipline, obviously, and I started doing well. Graduated with honors from my tech school, all that kind of stuff. So kind of a light bulb went on that, hey, if I really apply myself to this, you know, I'd always applied myself to basketball and sports and done well, but not so much academically. So
you seem to get that later on in life, that when you apply yourself more in school, you're actually smarter than you think you are. You get that a lot.
And when you care about something that you know.
Yeah, exactly.
So many kids go to school and don't have no idea what they want to do, and they end up in debt and
exactly.
don't use the degree that they have, that kind of a thing. So,
or they don't have a degree that can get them where they want to go, so now they're backtracking.
Absolutely.
So I've always told my son, you know, you just take your time. You're 16. You don't know what you're going to, you don't know what you want to do.
Right.
Just, you know, live your life, have some fun, do new experiences, and if something piques your interest, let's go that.
Absolutely.
And in fact, I know this is off the subject, but, you know, my son's, I'm really interested into that crime scene stuff. And I find that the school he goes to actually has one of those classes. It's like a crime scene investigation class that you can take as science.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, so that's what he's doing this year as a junior. So hopefully he can get a little bit more interested in science. He wasn't interested in dissecting frogs. So I know he's not going the doctor route.
It's usually how it goes.
Yeah. So it's one of those things, you know, you're so right. When you finally find something that you're interested in, the light bulb goes off and you become more invested in that. So.
Absolutely.
Well, that's good. So obviously, you know, being injured and seeing your chiropractor was a way that helped you. And obviously it was helping, you had a desire to maybe want to help others as well. Is that how that came about? Or you said, okay, that's what happened. I saw this chiropractor. That's what I want to do.
Pretty much in a nutshell. I mean, it helped me immensely and quickly. You know, like I said, I never we were never like a super holistic family, but we didn't really go to the doctor more just because we couldn't afford it, probably more than anything. It was just,
Who can?
rub some dirt on it and keep going. Because I grew up,
Robitussin.
Farm.
Robitussin for everything.
Oh yeah. I remember my mom giving me a hot toddy when I was sick and all that kind of stuff. So that's
I wish my mom would. Hey mom, see, hot toddies do work. You could have given me one. Yeah, it's all good.
Yeah. So it worked. It helped me out, got me back in the game. I still played basketball through the Air Force on the base team, so I was still pretty active and helped me out really quickly. And then the doctor there took an interest too and kind of asked me about it, thought I'd be a good candidate for whatever reason. I have no idea.
That helps. Maybe a mentor type.
Yeah. And I kind of bounced back and forth because I was going to teach and coach too. That was always kind of in my heart to be like a high school teacher, basketball coach, that kind of a thing. So I kind of bounced back and forth between those two for a long time. And then just finally settled on going to chiropractic college. Nice. Yeah.
Well, when I think of chiropractor, like the Snap, Crackle, Pop Rice Krispie treats come to mind.
Mm-hmm. Part of it. I get that a lot.
But I'm sure there is more to it, as you just say. So what is a chiropractor and what exactly do you do?
Oh, man, that's a big question.
I know that's a big, loaded question. And, there's some people that have preconceived notions out there. So
that's kind of what I was going to talk about.
Yeah. So why don't you tell what do you do? What is chiropractic medicine to you?
Well, to me, I would say it is more about pain and overall function. So, my story was grew up playing tons of sports, had a lot of little nagging injuries. Mm-hmm. Through my education, I realized those nagging and through personal experience, those nagging injuries become bigger problems down the road unless they're really fixed. Now, fixed is kind of a loaded word because you're never really broken or fixed. You're always kind of fluctuating, to 100% function versus being hurt all the time, that kind of a thing. So to me, it's more about identifying, the main problems, seeing where you're dysfunctional. In English, that means, joints that are moving the way they're supposed to, muscles doing their job the way they're supposed to, all that kind of a thing. The actual adjustment itself is just, in a simplest form, finding joints that aren't moving the way they're supposed to and getting them to move better. There's other ways of doing it, like a simple stretch or mobilization techniques. But what the traditional adjustment is like what you were saying, you hear the popping noise, all that kind of stuff. And all that is
the Rice Krispie treats.
Yeah, exactly. People get all kinds of ideas about that, and some people love it, some people can't stand it. It's quite a difference between the two types of patients. Some people are scared to death when they come in. Some people are like, oh, the more noise, the better, that kind of a thing. So,
so do you always ask, do you like the noise or do you not like the noise? Is like the
I don't
precursor?
ask it in that word, but I probably could use those words. But I do ask them, how they've had an adjustment before, just to, because there's lots of different variability. Like you said, there's a lot of preconceived notions about chiropractic. And that's one of them, is that there's lots of different experiences. You could go to 20 chiropractors and have 20 different experiences, whereas medicine is more standardized. So that's right. I think where some of the confusion comes in.
So there is some popping with the adjustment, but obviously there's other things too. You mentioned manipulation or stretching. You have some contraptions that look kind of weird in your office, right. But they all have a purpose.
Absolutely. Yep. The bottom line is trying to get movement where there's not movement, and then we also try to give corrective exercises for places that need strengthening, that kind of a thing.
So you give your patients homework?
Absolutely, yep.
Okay.
I'm a big proponent of making them self-sufficient, not reliant on me all the time. I feel like as a good doctor, that's their job, is to make patients more independent, going down the road.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. Now, you mentioned, you went to chiropractic college. Obviously, there's got to be some type of specialized training. What does it take to become a chiropractor? What did you have to do?
Typically, you go to school you don't actually need, when I went to school, it may be different now, you don't need a bachelor's degree to get into chiropractic college. We needed basically 3 years of undergrad, and then you could finish your fourth year to get your bachelor's degree in conjunction with getting your doctorate. So my first year of chiropractic college was the first year of my doctorate and the last year of my bachelor's degree. So basically a 4-year degree, and then chiropractic college is another, it's 3 calendar years. So we go nonstop for 3 years. We have 3 semesters per year instead of 2. Oh. So if you broke it down into traditional, it's 5 extra years of school.
But you just went nonstop without the break in between, like normal colleges have for like summer break.
Exactly. Yep.
So
It's the equivalent of 8 total years, if you get your bachelor's and then chiropractic college together, basically.
Right. And you study certain classes, I'm assuming, like body analogy?
Yep. It's very similar to med school. I would say the difference is that we don't learn about pharmacology because we don't prescribe medicine.
I was going to say, what is pharmacology?
Yep, drugs and, that kind of medications, all that kind of stuff. But as far as like the basic sciences, anatomy, physiology, radiology, we actually have more radiology than the typical medical doctor. Most MDs will go and specialize in radiology after med school, that kind of a thing. But just in the base medical school versus chiropractic college, we get quite a bit of radiology because we, treat the musculoskeletal system quite a bit.
Right, that's what you see day in and day out.
Exactly, yep. So it's just... The basic sciences are pretty similar, but we differ based on the tools and the treatments that we offer. We're more similar to physical therapists now. They don't have as much.
So I've had the pleasure of being in your office. I've seen some tools that are actually reminiscent of physical therapy. Do you also do physical therapy in your office, or are those just the tools to help get the movement going? It's
more tools. It's more of a side tool, I guess, for chiropractors, because we're not physical therapists. I don't want to portray myself as a physical therapist because our schooling is slightly different. I think my personal opinion is I think the two together offer the best solutions for most, musculoskeletal type problems, neck and back pain, that kind of a thing. But there is very much a crossover between the two professions, for sure. So
working hand in hand, they work together.
Absolutely.
So do you have a couple of physical therapists that you work with or that you recommend that you would, pair up with? Do you usually have those for your patients?
We do. I'm big on referring, if I don't have the tools to help somebody, I'm big on getting people to the right places. Sometimes it's a matter of me trying, for a week or two. And if we're not at least moving in the right direction pretty quickly, then we'll get them to whether it's a orthopedic surgeon or a physical therapist, whoever the case is, whatever. And I would really try to go out of my way to identify who's going to help them the best. Because I know a lot of patients struggle with that, just not knowing. It's so overwhelming sometimes to know who to go to, and you could end up paying a copay to 5 different people and still not be in the right place. So if we can guide them, if I can help them and we can guide them to the most effective person to save them hopefully some time and money, then that's
extremely helpful in any book that's out there.
Yeah.
So is your training ever really done? Do you ever do continuing education with all of the new tools and technology and, things that are out there? I would think that there would be some type of, continuing education for your type of profession.
Absolutely. I mean, it's required. There's 12 hours are required per year, and that's to maintain your license. My wife will tell you I'm a pretty big nerd when it comes to. It's funny because I was not this way in high school. I was not.
You portrayed yourself as a jock in high school, and now you're a nerd. Okay.
Now I am very much because I read constantly, and I'm always taking classes. What's a little bit different about my practice as far as the physical therapy side of things is of taking extra certifications from functional movement systems. There's a guy named Greg Cook. He's a physical therapist, pretty well known in that kind of world. And there's a certification called the Selective Functional Movement Assessment. And that's kind of an ongoing, it's a way to look at the body on how people are moving, because most problems come from, we just don't move. Either we don't move enough or we move poorly when we do move and we end up getting ourselves hurt. So I'm constantly reading things, taking certifications, that kind of stuff. Just because I'm interested in one thing, but it also, I don't think we ever know enough to help everyone. So I'm trying to just sharpen my tools and put more tools in my toolbox, that kind of thing.
Got it. So your patients are in good hands.
I'd like to believe so.
Pun intended.
Right.
He's not over there laughing. He should be, though. So all jokes aside, and oops, we have a guest on the table. Sorry. Looks like a lightning bug. All my jokes aside and out of the system, I've spoken to a lot of patients of chiropractic doctors, and you had mentioned this. They're not really standardized, and I have mixed reviews when it comes to, I had a good experience at a chiropractor, I had a bad experience at a chiropractor. What do you think stems from that? What do you think would the mixed reviews stem from?
I think some of it, you could talk about this for 2 hours. It's been kind of a long-standing, I guess, battle, so to speak. I mean, chiropractic is relatively new. it's been an organized profession since I think 1895 was like the first official adjustment. Even though bone setting stuff that we do has been around a long time, it hasn't really been a named profession for all that long, for a little over 100 years now. And when it first came out, it was very similar to like doctors of osteopath. It was the manipulation or the chiropractic adjustment, that's what we call that, is a manipulation, is getting proper spinal alignment, things like that can affect multiple things, like overall health and well-being, that kind of a thing. So I think there's been controversy in that, and some chiropractors have really been adamant about, chiropractic adjustments can help everything from asthma to ADHD and all these kinds of things, which there's anecdotal evidence, basically a guy gave an adjustment and his ADHD seemed to improve, but that's not evidence of it being cause and effect, that kind of a thing. So there can be people taking that to the extremes, and making claims that are not necessarily substantiated. And that's the position that I take, is that it's very substantiated that we can help with back and neck pain, those types of things. I do believe overall spinal health can impact your overall health, but to say, that we can treat ADHD and things like that, that's where I think some chiropractors get themselves in trouble.
Take it to the extreme.
Correct.
And trying to...
And believing, everybody should be adjusted multiple times a month, that kind of a thing. I don't necessarily agree with that. Everybody's different. There's not a one tool that affects and fixes everything. So
every patient is different.
Absolutely.
So, and speaking of patients, every patient is different. Not when I think of a typical chiropractic visit, I think someone had to have been in an accident prior to coming to you, but that's not always the case. You have clients coming to you for many reasons.
Correct. Yep.
What are some of the reasons that somebody might want to visit a chiropractor or think about, hey, this has been, why should someone think about seeing a chiropractor?
Absolutely. It's actually more common for people to come up and say, hey, this low back's been bothering me for 2 months and I have no idea why. It's
really,
I see more of those people than, car accidents, or my practice is not a big personal injury practice. I do see some of those for sure. And the injury is obvious there. You fell, you hurt yourself, or you got hit by somebody, or I sprained my ankle playing basketball, that kind of a thing. But I would say the vast majority are, office workers or construction workers, all kinds of different types of jobs that it's more chronic pain, and it's finally at a level that they're going to do something about it. So, a typical case is a construction worker that has kind of some low-level back pain, but who doesn't over the age of 40 that's been using their body that much to that degree.
I'm raising my hand. You can't see me, but I'm raising my hand.
So, and then it finally gets to a point, they deal with it for so long, and it gets to a point where they can't do their job effectively, or they can't play with their kids, that kind of a thing. And that's the typical case that comes in.
Well, they're guarding it almost. We're at the point that they're just kind of limiting their movement, which actually hurts them because they're not doing the full range of motion.
Yep, absolutely.
I've learned this because you're a great doctor and you've helped. But yes, I was doing a lot of guarding with my neck, so that was one of them that are there.
And pain, one thing I'll say is that pain leads to other problems too. Anytime there's pain in the body, you can push through it to a degree, but your body reflexively will change to adapt to it, and that can cause problems, maybe a month from now, maybe 5 years from now, but it usually will change things down the road too. And that's kind of where the movement assessment comes in, and that's why I did that is you can really identify how poorly people are moving and predict based on that of where they're going to have issues,
Really?
Common problems would be like ankle, like basketball players, going back to my story. I broke my ankle, sprained them tons of times. And over the years, I kept having low back pain. And then through learning and all that, I realized most people with ankle injuries have hip issues. And when your hip is asymmetrical, meaning one side's a lot tighter than the other, it's a big predictor of low back pain. So people come in with low back pain, but really their problem probably started 10 years ago playing high school basketball when they kept spraining their ankles, that kind of a thing.
So Brittany's going to be upset that I'm probably talking about her here, but my office manager, Brittany, was actually in a really severe car accident where she shattered her ankle, and she has limited movement, and she does have lower back pain. My guess is that's probably where it's stemming from. Some of that.
Good chance for sure.
Good chance that's there.
When you take it, I can't take credit for this. Gray Cook is the guy that kind of came up with the joint. He calls it the joint by joint concept of joints take turns, from mobile to stable. When one of those gets out of whack, like your ankle, it should be a very mobile joint.
It makes very good
stiff,
sense, though.
Then the joints above it have to kind of reverse that order too, and that's usually what happens. So like your ankle should be mobile, your knee should be pretty stable, your hips should be mobile, your low back should be very stable. Like a lot of people do tons of crunches and sit-ups that they make your abs strong, give you a six-pack, but they'll probably hurt your back eventually. So getting those in the proper order will generally help things out long term.
All right.
Yeah.
That is so interesting. So this actually leads me to one of my next questions as we're talking about, these joints and moving. And I'm sure not everybody here or listening has been to a chiropractor, understands what a chiropractor actually does. Let's say they're coming to you for the first time. Mm-hmm. What would that first visit look like for them? Okay.
So it's pretty standard at consultation. Consultation is just an interview, kind of like what you and I are doing here. Just ask them a lot about their history, old injuries, the particular problem that they're coming up in with, that kind of a thing. What have they done for it? Have they gone to other doctors? Have they gotten x-rays? All that kind of stuff. We try to be really, really thorough in that first interview to understand kind of, what that person does day to day, what issues they've had, trying to basically put the case together of, what's going on with that particular person. And then the next step is to do an examination. Chiropractic exam is fairly standard. It's pretty similar to what you'd have done at an orthopedic surgeon's office or a physical therapist's office, because we all learn the same orthopedic test, neurological test, all that kind of stuff. There's not really a special chiropractic exam per se.
Okay.
There's a few extra things that we'll do as chiropractors because we primarily work with our hands, and what we call that is palpation. It basically just means we're putting our hands on them to see how joints are moving, things like that. And then the extra part of what we do is what's called the selective functional movement assessment through FMS. And that's basically just taking you through a standardized movement process and scoring you, can you do this? Can you not do this? Does it hurt? That kind of a thing. And that helps us identify the corrective exercise component of things more. But that's typically the process. Usually a first visit will take about an hour. We spend about an hour with the patient that first time to really get to understand them, identify what those problem areas are, and then let them know, this is what I see. This is what I think I can do or can't do. And if I can't do something, I think you should see this person, that kind of a thing.
Do you actually do an adjustment that first time?
Most often, yes. There's cases where if somebody has some neurological issues, things that are more significant, we'll refer them out typically to either get an x-ray or an MRI, because neurology is the more significant. If that's, and what I mean by that is, pain shooting down legs, arms, things going numb, tingly, all that kind of stuff. Those are indicators that there's some kind of neurological tissue that's irritated in there, and that's more significant. We can still potentially help that, but we want to make sure we're really clear on what's going on, and if they should get to somebody that can do more about it more quickly, then we want to do that right away. But typically we'll adjust the first visit.
So first visit's not scary.
I don't think so. I don't know if every patient.
It's true. And I mean, we touched a little bit about this. There are several misconceptions about chiropractors. Mm-hmm. What are some of the misconceptions that you see day in and day out?
Well, I think one that's common is you probably heard once you go to a chiropractor, you have to go for the rest of your life. That's a common one. And I think where that comes from, there are negative connotations and positive to that, I would say. Mm-hmm. On the negative side, there definitely are, I'll just say it, bad chiropractors, like there's bad everything else. Mm-hmm. There's bad medical doctors out there too that their interests are not in the patient's best interest necessarily always. It's more of a business consideration. I think that's rare, luckily. The positive side of it is that there are people that do generally need to come in for more kind of maintenance care, that kind of a thing. People that have chronic, arthritis, people that have had bad injuries. You can't really fix the problem, but you can kind of help manage
alleviate
it over time.
It.
Right. And I try to really make that clear of like why this is the case, because it's not the case for everybody. If somebody's in good shape, they're taking care of themselves, I don't necessarily think they need to come in, on a maintenance basis per se. Some people just like to check in, every 6 months or so just to say, hey, say hi, get adjusted, that kind of a thing if they need it. But there's definitely cases where, the guy's got no disc in his back and he's got chronic arthritis, and you're not going to fix that problem. But if you can keep movement in there, it'll do them some good. So
exactly. So it doesn't get stiff and
correct.
Yeah. So.
But there's definitely chiropractors out there that believe that, you know, everybody should be adjusted, you know, once a week the rest of their life, that kind of a thing. And I think that's where the negative connotation comes from, probably.
So how do you specifically, you obviously you're out and about, you tell somebody you're a chiropractor, how do you overcome those negative connotations?
I don't try too hard. I feel like if I'm trying to, you know, answer, I don't want to ever come across like I'm trying to really sell anybody on it. You know, I just say, hey, I try to keep it simple. I'm, you know, like I said, a country boy from Iowa. I try to keep things pretty transparent and say, hey, come in, we'll ask some questions, do an exam. If I feel like I can help you, I'll tell you. If I feel like I can't, I won't, you know. And more about the ongoing care kind of thing, I'll tell people what I think and let them know that the ball's always in their court, you know. Because what we're doing is not, you know, we're not curing cancer. We're not, you know, doing heart transplants. Do I believe somebody will benefit from what we're doing? Most often, yes. But you know, they're not going to die if they don't come to a chiropractor and nothing like that. It's totally their choice. Especially after we get them out of pain, I always tell them, you know, that if I do feel like they're a candidate for ongoing care, I'll tell them that and say, hey, you know, it's probably a good idea. You know, we're not going to make you feel perfect, but I think it'll help you down the road. Or I may tell them that to just call in as needed, that kind of a thing. And it's always their choice when it gets to that point.
I like it. I like it a lot. So that being said, what products and services do you offer? Well,
the main thing, the bread and butter, is the chiropractic adjustment. That's the main thing that we, you know, are taught to do. And I think that's probably what differentiates chiropractors from most others. There are some physical therapists, some osteopathic doctors that do manipulation that's similar to what we do. I would say generally we're going to be better at it because that's our main training in that, and that's what we do every single day. The other side of it is the corrective exercise component of it, and that's where physical therapists are probably better, generally speaking, because that's kind of their bread and butter. I'm trying to kind of fit the space in between of, you know, I'm not a physical therapist. I don't have all the facility that they have, but I believe in exercise. I've always been active. I think it's very vital to teach people to be, again, self-sufficient. But they need help in knowing what to do and how to do it properly, that kind of a thing.
Okay.
So
you touched on something because you said that there is another doctor that's similar. I'm sorry.
Osteopath. So
an osteopath.
It's what people know as a DO. Usually after your primary care physician or the surgeon's name, it'll be MD or DO.
Okay.
And DO is Doctor of Osteopath.
Okay. So let me ask you, so how do most chiropractors will put themselves out there as a chiropractor, correct? So they're not going to have a doctor of osteopathic, I probably said that wrong, medicine. But how can one tell that they're actually going to a chiropractor versus the DO?
Most will advertise. It'll say DC after their name.
DC.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're considered a doctor of chiropractic. And most people will have chiropractic in their business name, you know, whether it's Moyle Chiropractic or they'll have some kind of other name, but it'll have chiropractic in the name typically.
So that way you know it. But DC is the designation instead of
Correct.
DO.
Yep.
So that was what I was getting at.
Yep.
In a roundabout way.
Yeah, no, I was tracking with you. And most MDs and DOs now it's hard to differentiate, but some DOs learn to manipulate. That's the wording for what most people think of as the chiropractic adjustment. Osteopaths learn to do some of that too. And osteopaths and chiropractors used to be very similar, but it's kind of, the DOs have gone more down the medical side of things, I would say. So it's harder to differentiate between those two.
Okay.
But, yeah.
It is getting harder and harder to find out, you know, the difference between MD and DO and, you know, everything that's out there. So It's always nice to know when someone's got a difference. Yeah. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Connecting Tucson with Jamie, where we focus on connecting our community and local businesses. As your local insurance professional for professional and commercial lines insurance needs and a small business owner here in Tucson, I know it's important to make new and lasting connections in our community. You never know when a connection will spark or pull you in a direction where you didn't even think you should go. If you're a small business owner or involved in a community project and you'd like to be featured on the show, please feel free to give me a call. All of my information is on TucsonBusinessRadioX.com, and I'd absolutely love to hear from you. Today we're talking with Dr. Jason Moyle, who owns his own practice here in Tucson. So you've been in Tucson for 16 plus years, but practicing chiropractic medicine for 10, correct?
Correct.
So I find Tucson to be more of a large town with like a small feel. Many of my clients, they just want to get to know me prior to doing business with me. They want to, know about my family, how long I've been doing business, and just every little nuance about me before they'll actually give me their business. Do you find that to be the same thing in your small business, or is it completely different because you're more of like a service provider with an actual like tangible feel?
No, I agree completely. I mean, I don't know, maybe that's just my personality, so I draw those types of people too. My mom and stepdad owned a bar for 30 some years in small town Iowa, so we're just kind of used to that kind of community feel.
So that's where the psychiatrist comes from.
Yeah, probably, yeah. And it is very much like that sometimes. But I mean, our practice has a very kind of laid back feel. I believe that, at least that's what people tell us is, our staff is very, very friendly. We really try to not make it a kind of a sterile, kind of uptight environment, that kind of a thing.
I love the chocolate.
Yeah, there's chocolate, there's coffee in there. And I really enjoy getting to know people. So, I mean, and in that process, they get to know me too. When we're adjusting, there's a lot of time to have conversation, that kind of a thing. So we're always getting to know each other and getting to know other people's kids and, what they do and vacations they take and all that kind of stuff. So
it's definitely a laid back feel. You have a good conversational style. It does help put people at ease in my opinion as well. So yeah, I just find Tucson is a little bit different most places. In big cities, I've also worked. It's more of they don't want to get to know you. They just want to see you online. They're going to do their own research. They're not even going to talk to you. Right. But here in Tucson, no, they have to talk to you. They have to visit with you.
No, I definitely agree with that. And I've never lived in a big city. So I grew up in a tiny town, and like you said, Tucson is kind of a, big little town sort of. And that's kind of how it is here.
It's big little, I like that. Big little town. I like it. So obviously, I find businesses here to have their own unique challenges. What are some challenges that you face day in, day out, either as a chiropractic doctor or as a local business owner, an entrepreneur?
Yeah. I think as a chiropractor, we kind of touched on some of that. There's some misconceptions about chiropractic. So, when I first started out, you'd get kind of uptight about that kind of stuff and try to get defensive. But I think with most things, once you get a little older, you don't,
Wiser.
You're not as worried about that kind of stuff. You are who you are. If people get to know you, I think they'll, know that you're not a crazy person, that kind of a thing. And then from a business perspective, that's one thing is chiropractors, we don't learn much about business. You get all gung ho about going to chiropractic college and learning and then about that last quarter, you're like, man, what am I going to do after this? And you realize you know nothing about business. I mean, technically, I guess my mom and stepdad ran a bar, I guess, successfully for a number of years, but I didn't pay attention to any,
how they did it.
Yeah. Accounts receivable, what the heck is that kind of stuff? And
HR, what?
Yeah. And all the stuff that went into that. So I think like most entrepreneurs, I would say just managing all the different hats, I don't know that chiropractic is any different than insurance or whatever in some regards, is you got to wear a lot of hats doing it. Marketing is not my forte. Luckily, my wife has a marketing degree. She's the opposite
so
of me.
So you lean on her. I see how that,
I get her advice a lot. But I would say that's the biggest one, is just the time demands of being a husband, a father, a chiropractor, and having to learn business stuff at the same time. So.
And I'm sure we're going to touch on that just a little bit later too. So, because that's one of the things that I have as a small business owner, and there's so many different hats.
Absolutely.
But you're obviously doing something right with your business because you've been thriving. And what sets you apart from other chiropractors, and why do you feel that you're so successful?
Well, I try to just be very honest. I think that's at the heart of it, is you got to really be honest with people, especially when they're trusting you with their health. Being very transparent, being very straightforward with them. Our staff, we try to go out of our way. Sometimes they don't like this very much because it can be a pain in the butt, like calling insurance companies. But we try to be adamant about, hey, put yourself in that situation. You've been in it where you're confused about your insurance coverage. You have no idea what kind of bill you're going to get. So we try to really go out of our way to make sure they understand what it's going to cost. Your insurance does this and it's really not that good a deal. So you're better off doing this other thing, that kind of a thing. So we always give them options there. And then, just just being honest with people, treating people the way you want them to be treated pretty much I know that's not very fancy, but that's kind of
tried and true always works is what I say. Treat others as you'd like to be treated.
Absolutely.
And I do the same thing with my staff. I said, put yourself in a situation if you had an increase, what would you want to have your agent do? Would you, want them to reach out to say, here's some options that we can reduce it? And I think that's probably what got through to my staff is that, oh, okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, don't avoid the situation. That just makes it worse.
Yeah. They're not trying to make your day bad. They're just, they just don't know what's going on.
Exactly.
And really, it's our job.
It's our job to try to help them and guide them and let them know, their options, their choices, if there are some that are out there. And, sometimes we're the bearer of bad news to, there are no options. This is what you've got.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do have to tell them that sometimes. I don't like, you always want to have a solution for someone, but sometimes the solution is you got to go to somebody else. I can't help you, that kind of a thing.
Exactly.
But they appreciate, the honesty of that. But
I absolutely agree on that one 100%. So anyways, I always find with, success as in business as you do, there's some learning experiences that come along the way. What would you say is your biggest learning experience when probably opening up your business and becoming an entrepreneur? What was that learning moment for you that you had that either took you a little bit more time to grasp or that you're like, oh, I gotta get this in order to be what I want to be?
Right. I would say looking back, when you're young, I was an associate chiropractor for 4 years with a guy in town here. And he was a great guy, great mentor. And I always knew and respected him. But there was also a part of, when you're young and naive and you think you know more than you do, I probably didn't listen to him as much as I should have. I think finding that mentor, and as long as they're good people, good ethical people, they really know what they're talking about and they've been through some of the battles that you have yet to go through. So I think humbling myself a little bit more when you're young. And there's a lot that goes into that. You're just trying to get started. You have all kinds of energy, all that kind of stuff. I had little kids at home, so there's some stress there trying to make sure that we could provide for them the best way possible. So then you start thinking, you can figure things out better. And then sometimes you can, but I think generally speaking, it's better to listen to those guys and kind of humble yourself a little bit more when it comes to that. And I think that just goes for life. Just stay humble and realize you're not ever going to figure it all out, but learn from other people's mistakes so you don't have to make as many on your own, hopefully.
Keep your mind open, ears open.
Right.
Your mouth should remain shut, and you should have your ears open more than your mouth is actually open.
Absolutely. And not being afraid to make mistakes. I think that's what I have struggled with. My wife would say that probably is that over-analyzing things, and instead of taking some action. Sometimes I tend to overthink things and never pull the trigger on things. But, listening from mentors and taking some time to plan, but then pulling the trigger on it and being okay if you're going to make a mistake. Everybody makes mistakes, and that's ultimately the best way we learn. So I think that's something I still struggle with a little bit is not being afraid to fail in some ways,
Well, true. And I think for you, and if you fail, and I think failing for your business is not being able to help somebody, but maybe that's not the fail. You're pointing them in a different direction. I think you're, taking that a little bit personally. Mine is the same way. There's some people that I can't help, and I have to let them know that I can't. But always having people there that I can say, this is who can, and knowing that I can count on those people.
Yes, absolutely.
That being said, you are an entrepreneur, and a lot of the listeners here are, wanting to be entrepreneurs or potentially brand new entrepreneurs, and a lot of businesses go out of business in the first 1 to 2 years.
Right.
What would you say to those young entrepreneurs out there just starting out business? What would be some advice that you'd give them?
I think finding a mentor for sure, asking questions. And I've never found someone to say no if I say, hey, can I take you out to lunch and ask you a few questions? Most people that are good people are very giving of their time in that way. And then also just reading books. I love reading books. I'm a big Dave Ramsey proponent. He's big on, getting out of debt, that kind of a thing. He has a lot of personal finance stuff, but he's also got a book called Entre Leadership it's kind of his playbook of how he runs his business and all that. And he's got a podcast, and there's even a coaching program that you can do, I think. I've never done that, but it's, he's very open with his kind of journey of what he went through, and he kind of wrote it down in a book, basically. He calls it entre leadership because I think the way he describes it is an entrepreneur has, 100 ideas before he gets to work every day. And
I 100% agree on those 100 ideas. Like, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do that. Can't do them all, though. So that's the issue, is trying to figure out something that works for you.
And that's what the leadership side of that is. You have to balance the two. There's the entrepreneur that's, coming up with all these ideas, but there's also the leadership side of things where you have to kind of get those ideas in actionable formats and all that.
I'd say one of the hardest things coming to business for myself, just for those listening, was just figuring out the logistics of actually opening up the business.
Yeah.
And I think having somebody there that was already in business showing me what I needed to apply for versus what I didn't need to apply for probably would have been very helpful at the time. Yeah. So for me, it was more along the lines of, okay, do I need a TPT tax? No, I'm not selling a good in services. So those types of things, what kind of licenses do I need? Do I have to, what kind of insurance? I already knew the type of insurance that I need, obviously, but that is just one thing where I struggled with was I knew insurance, just like you probably knew chiropractor, but I had no idea what it took to run a business from. I have to be the HR person. I have to be the hirer. I have to be the manager. I have to be the person, to do all the contracts. I have to do the payroll. It was just like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It was like eye-opening. And I think having people to lean on to say, what do you use? How do you do that? Is probably not just a mentor in the business, but a mentor on how to open a business, having somebody that's there. And I always tell people, if you're interested in opening a business, give me a call. I'll walk you through some of the horrors and some of the highlights that I had. And I'm very open and honest with it. Right. I went through a struggle the first year and a half.
Oh yeah. And I don't think there's a business owner alive that hasn't, struggled with things for sure. Because it's tough, but if you just do a little bit every day. And I think being willing to pay somebody that knows what they're doing. I made the mistake of trying to keep track of my own books like the first year in practice. And
ouch.
It's ultimately not, you don't want to be doing difficult, that. But I would not do it for 2 months, 3 months, and then I'd be up for, 4 days straight trying to catch up on stuff. And I think you just have to be willing to, and a lot of people are bootstrapping businesses, so they don't have a whole lot of finances to do it.
Right.
And I think there is a place for, at least being aware of how to do things, but when you can, hire people that know what they're doing. And
I think find a good CPA.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is probably my one biggest thing that I could tell anybody. Don't do that yourself. Find a CPA.
I would agree. My CPA helped me out a lot, like with all the licensing and all that kind of stuff, because I had no idea what any of that stuff was, and he at least walked me through that process. So,
that's always good to have there. We touched on it. Business owners, you're wearing so many hats. It's hard. So I go from manager to owner to agent to HR to contractor to hiring to marketing to social media, all of these different hats that you wear during the day. And it's hard to take all of those hats off at the end of the day when I'm at home.
Oh, yeah.
So work-life balance for me is always, I guess, been a struggle for me. I'm not really good at separating the two. How do you balance your work and family life? And do you have any routines and tips that you can help share with our listeners?
I try to, once I go home, I try to just flip the switch as best I can, which that sounds really simple, but it is a simple idea. It's not easy to do necessarily.
Easier said than done, yes.
Correct, yep. Sometimes I'm good at it. Sometimes I'm not so good at it, And my wife is pretty good, whether it's just giving me a look or whatever it is, that, and that's
good
enough.
At the looks.
That's typically enough for me to okay, I gotta, because I can be there physically, but she can tell when I'm mentally there or not. If my daughter's talking to me and I have that kind of glaze in my eye, that kind of a thing, thinking about things. And I don't ever want to do that, but sometimes you just have stuff on your mind. But she's pretty good about keeping me accountable and, just telling me to snap out of it, that kind of a thing. And I really try to carve out that time from when I get home to when they go to bed. I'm not thinking about anything else. Do I always succeed at that? No, necessarily. But then once they're back in bed, if I had to do something. And I also get up early. The military kind of brainwashed me. I'm up at 4:30, 4:45 every single morning. Oh,
we should start texting at that early. Yeah. Come on, let's do it. I'm up at 4:30, 4:45 too.
Some people just don't understand. My wife is not a morning person. She just kind of rolls over and rolls her eyes at me. But
My husband's the same way. He's like, seriously, it's like 4:30. What are you doing?
I'm kind of lucky because I've always, even since high school, I've got up. I just liked having my time in the morning to just
I find it
relax.
peaceful, and I can get a lot done in the morning because there's really nothing there.
Absolutely.
Nothing there. So, well, not only that, I think it gives me time to those 100 ideas that I've got going on. I'm doing it at that point in time, and I can sit there and, write down what I need to get done, what I should get done, and then what I want to get done, my needs, wants, and wishes type deal for the day. And I make sure my needs come first. So, that's out there.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned earlier that your wife is good at marketing, but marketing is a big part of business. What are you doing right now for any type of marketing to help get out there?
Well, we actually are trying to rebrand everything right now, currently. I have a friend, luckily enough, he's a website guy, and he does social media and all that kind of stuff. So I finally we've been talking about it for such a long time. Remember, going back to me thinking about things for way too long. This one we're finally starting to pull the trigger on. So we're going to kind of redo our website and kind of rewrite our marketing copy, that kind of a thing, to better portray kind of what we're doing and why we're different, that kind of a thing. I've done some networking groups, which have been good, but it's just hard, again, going back to the time thing, even though they are effective and I enjoy it. And I still have a lot of relationships with people, 10 years ago when I first did a networking group, and I still know a lot of those people. I coach youth basketball, and that's not really the purpose of doing that is not networking really, but I find that the more natural networking, the just getting to know people
in the sports, absolutely,
is more effective, because you get to know the parents and whatnot, and inevitably, that's one of the first questions that comes up is, what do you do? That kind of a thing. And then you just start talking to people about that.
Yeah, I start talking to people about what I do. I get that deer in the headlight look. They're like, oh, your insurance?
People probably think insurance is all the same, right? My wife did insurance, so she educated me on that.
They're different types. Trust me. Yeah. So obviously you touched on it. Coming home and wearing those different hats, there's a lot of stress being a business owner. What do you do to de-stress?
Work out. That's probably a big thing for sure.
Show off.
Yeah. That's part of getting up at 4:30, 4:45 in the morning. And I realize if I don't do that, I'm just a more grumpy, less pleasurable person to be around.
Less productive too, because your brain's not.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then also, my faith is a big thing. I go to church, I'm not trying to preach to anybody, but my faith is pretty important to me. Reading, the Bible, going to church, getting to know people, that kind of a thing. I would say that's up there as far as keeping me level-headed and getting the stress off too, as well.
I think it's big. Yeah. I do a lot of meditation.
Yeah.
Very good. I'm not very good at it.
Right.
That's why I do a lot of it. But I try to, since I haven't been able to work out due to my injuries for a while. But I'm starting to do it again. Really excited. So we touched about marketing. We touched about staying, busy and wearing different hats. I see a lot of chiropractors out on the street. Mm-hmm. Not like literally on the street. That would be awkward. Coming along with that little contraption.
Selling newspapers or whatever.
No, but there are a lot of chiropractors out there, just like there's a lot of insurance agents. And I've got to do things differently to stay competitive and keep the edge on. What do you do to stay competitive in your business?
I think the time with patients. Our model is definitely spending a little bit more time with patients. We kind of limit our schedule to only seeing so many people per day. That way we can spend more time with them. And then also I touched on it, the corrective exercise component and the extra certifications that I've taken. I think that's pretty rare in the chiropractic world. A lot of physical therapists have those certifications, but not too many chiropractors do. And that just comes from my own personal desire of being hurt and kind of applying what they taught me to myself and realizing it works a lot and being able to help other people with those types of things, like show them the corrective exercises. And most back problems can be effectively managed or even fixed with some kind of stretch or exercise routine of some sort. So I would say that differentiates us more so than anything else, I would say.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's clear you love what you do. You have a lot of passion for it. What do you like best about what you do?
I think just getting to know people, really. I think that's whatever you do. I think we're ultimately here for other people per se. Usually the people that are just living for themselves are more miserable from my observation. So if you're just there, focused on your own goals constantly, it tends to not go as well, but you're just there kind of having fun with people. You're obviously there being professional, offering a service for people, but like we were talking about being conversational with people, just kind of getting to know them and on a personal level too. I think that's fun to me. Maybe it comes from being, my parents owning a bar, you just kind of talk to people. And like you said, the psychologist thing, people tend to open up, when you're in those situations, and,
right.
Everybody wants somebody to talk to. And I think that's what I enjoy the most. And then learning, obviously, I just love learning about the body, and I'm always amazed at how the body works. So
the nerd has finally come out.
Yeah, exactly.
So you say.
It's there. I'm telling you, we all got a little bit of nerd in us. So.
Well, I love numbers, so numbers and insurance. So I'm probably a bigger nerd than most people because I do a lot of reading and things as well. But hey, I find someone likes to talk about those types of things, and that's me.
Absolutely.
And not everybody likes to talk about insurance, but when they need to use it, they want to make sure that they've got the correct stuff.
Absolutely.
So, and I'm there to help them. Now, you actually touched on my last question just a second ago about goals. Now, everyone's got goals. What are your goals to come out of? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Do you have any specific goals that you're striving for, either be it like new marketing, new connections? What would you like to see happen?
Yeah, I think just definitely clarifying my message, getting better at explaining kind of what I do and why I'm different, I guess, from most chiropractors. Because I really want to be a service to the community of really helping people understand their problem and giving them long-term solutions to it. I've always been kind of a do-it-yourselfer kind of guy. So if I like to learn stuff that I can apply and really see results, and I think that's where the exercise component comes in. So that's my goal, is to really effectively have people know that I have their best interest in mind and really leave the office, feeling better physically and hopefully mentally, but also feeling educated and equipped to be able to take care of some things on their own as well when they get in a problem.
That is huge. Not only can you help them, but giving them the tools to do it themselves. I highly, highly recommend you. I cannot say that more than enough. You've been more than helpful for me. You've provided me with some tips and making me to the point where I can move a little bit more flexible.
That's important.
That's important. So for those of you out there that are on the fence, I highly recommend it. Dr. Jason Moyle is here with us in the office, and that is all we have time for with Connecting with Tucson with Jamie. If you like the show, please let us know. You can get to know a little bit more about Dr. Jason Moyle and his business by going to TucsonBusinessRadioX.com and click on Connecting Tucson with Jamie. As always, don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone and make that new connection. You never know where it's going to lead, do you?
Absolutely.
You didn't know you were going to come on this podcast a few months ago, did you?
On my radar.
Until next time, keep on making unique connections. Thank you so much, Jason, and everyone have a fabulous day.
Thanks for having me.